All right, AMG has released the May balance update, the long-awaited May balance update. And I'm going to do some real quick content. I'm going to go through it, and we're going to talk about all the changes, my thoughts on them, and like, is this good for the game, and all those questions. So buckle in. This is what we're doing. So I think one of the things to talk about before we actually get into the May balance update is it isn't actually really a balance update. If you listen to how Atomic Mass Games has talked about this, while this does like update the balance of the game, the scope of this is actually like much more narrow than that. It's that they're repackaging a bunch of the characters into combo boxes, and they want to make sure that all of the characters in those combo boxes are released in playable states or in a way that is like good for the game. So they're just like taking this opportunity that they've kind of created to repack them with new cards to make sure that characters that aren't played see play and characters that are too strong are tamped down a little bit. So it's not a full balance pass. It's only really looking at the stuff that's being repackaged like this year. So with that, we have to start off 5 tactics cards. These tactics cards are not modified in any balanced state. They have updated wording to make them more clear about what they were intended to do and their rulings. The only one that's arguably different is Mutant Traitor, which now very clearly states no matter how many people are under the beam, you only ever take 1 damage from it. I think none of these cards are going to see any play. I think this update is mostly just so the people that want to play these very like flavorful cards can play them in a way that's clear, but none of these cards are strong. None of these cards will make a competitive 5, much less, or will never make a competitive 10, much less a competitive 5. So let's talk about all the characters. We're going to go a little bit out of order. I am going to start off with Cosmic Ghost Rider and Agent Venom. Cosmic Ghost Rider, there are no changes here. We just haven't actually seen an accurately printed card. Most of the Ghost Rider cards you've seen in the wild are things that websites like Jarvis have like created themselves. There hasn't been an AMG released correction to like his last balance pass, so it's just put here for completeness sake. Ghost Rider, no changes since last nerf. Similarly, Agent Venom. Venom Agente, come to me. Why did I decide to go out of order? Here we go. Agent Venom. Agent Venom has one small change, which is that Project Rebirth now says this character immediately makes a shake action instead of remove a condition on this character. This is a very, very slight nerf and mostly like a wording change to have him match more with how wording like this is going forward. The 2 interactions that this changes are Crystal and Scarlet Witch's aura of can't shake. Before, Agent Venom ignored that. He just removed the conditions. He didn't take the shake action. Now he pays 1 power to do the shake action, which mechanically is the same, but for abilities that reference shake, it's different. So you're not able to Project Rebirth while standing next to Crystal anymore. Crystal and Scarlet Witch see very little play. I don't really see that changing anytime soon. I think Agent Venom has largely had no changes. All right, moving on. Let's talk about some impactful changes. First off, I want to talk about these in a pair, but we've had 2 threats changes, and they're the 2 strongest 2 threats in the game, which are Bullseye, who had his range dropped to 3 from 4 on only his gainer, and we had Toad, who had a little bit more significant changes, where his builder no longer pushes, and he is 4/4 health instead of 5/3 health. I think the Toad changes really needed to happen. Toad was hands down the strongest 2 threat in the game. He was a pseudo safe grab. He was like really, really hard, or he was a really low commitment to pick something up off the midline, and then he was really hard to get it from. The hit point change has, I think, made that a lot more like manageable. Like 1 less hit point to get through to force him to the initial drop, I think is a big deal. And it also, I like this change because it makes him not just like made of glass on his backside. Also, Toad was the only 2 threat in the game that could adjust the positioning of another model with his wild push on his builder. So it made him both the best 2-threat at playing secures and the best 2-threat at playing extracts. I think fixing this makes him just the best 2-threat extract carrier and opens up design opportunity for a secure 2-threat to come along, which we've already seen a little bit of a glimpse of in Spider-Ham. So I think that opens up design space while like putting this character back in check. And I think because of these Toad nerfs are why we're seeing the Bullseye nerfs. I didn't really have a problem with where Bullseye was. Now I play a ton of Bullseye. I think he's the best all-around 2-threat. But I think if you don't touch Bullseye after you make those changes to Toad, Bullseye becomes like the de facto 2-threat that everyone is going to play. Hurting his range means that like he has to put himself in more danger to do his output. It also makes Rocket a better splash 2 or more enticing as a splash 2, because if like your goal is you want a 2-threat that does damage, Nebula and Rocket are now the best at that. Like Bullseye doesn't get 90% of the way there and then also be kind of evasive and a good extracts player. He has to be like just so much closer and so much more at risk when he fights. But I don't think anybody that was playing Bullseye before the Toad changes stops playing Bullseye and picks up one of the other models. Like maybe Foes does, especially if the Foes list is primarily Goblin. But I overall like these changes. I think it makes Rocket more enticing because if you just want a character that's going to lob high damage shots down range, Rocket's very good at that and like does threaten to do more damage more consistently than Bullseye. Now that the range is shorter and it's harder to apply Bullseye's damage. And like it also makes Bullseye's like I auto kill you on 2. Like if you're on 2 health and there's nothing you can do to stop me, you have to be within range 3 of Bullseye or he has to have 6 power. So overall, I think I'm pretty game with these changes. Let's talk about Doctor Strange 1. This is Doctor Strange 2. I know what I'm doing. Bing, bing, bing. Bong, bong, bong. Doctor, what? Is he literally just right above? No. Oh yeah, he's 2 above. Okay. Here we go. Doctor Strange 1. This is probably the most changed character. And AMG calls it a rework in their balance pass notes. I don't know if that's 100 true. The leadership is definitely reworked. So let's talk about his changes. First of all, 1 extra hit point on his backside, making him more durable. One of his primary problems was that he was a 5-threat, and he was one of the most fragile 5-threats in the game because his defensive mechanics were healing and increasing his defense dice. So there were both like ways around that. And when you don't have a big hit point pool, because you only had 12 hit points, being able to heal your hit point pool is only relevant if you're not being one-rounded. So 1 extra hit point on his backside means he can stick around a little bit longer, more likely to be able to use the healing on himself. His builder is stronger. It has Shield Pierce. For Doctor Strange, this increases his damage output as well as his power generation. Because keep in mind, when you roll shields, you get a power, and then it also will reduce their defenses by 1. So it's like a little bit less strong than Wild Pierce, but not that much. And I think it's just going to give him more consistent output, which will give him more consistent pushes, which is probably like the main reason to play this character, is that when you damage with the Bolts of Bedevilment, you get to push the opponent's character. Healing's now range 3 instead of range 2, means he's going to apply the healing more often. I'm a little bit worried about healing in the game in general, because like one of the feel bads of the game is when you leave a character or you fail to kill a character and then an opponent's activation can just undo any work you did, on top of you having handed that character a bunch of power from the damage that you dealt. And Doctor Strange kind of combines 2 mechanics that I don't particularly love, which is healing and activated tokens. I do think, especially in the very popular Hulk meta, activated tokens are very strong right now because lots of people are running around with Hulk, and activating Hulk, or even the threat of activating Hulk, can force Hulk to activate, which can apply pressure on the most powerful piece in the current metagame. So in that sense, the Doctor Strange coming into the meta may actually shake up the meta in a significant way, but I don't find his core mechanics particularly fun. So I'm a little bit worried, but it's easier for him to apply his heal because like you never wanted to walk and heal. You wanted to just be able to stand where you are, do your 2 attacks, or do your one bump if you're playing him in Midnight Suns, and do your 2 attacks, and then try to throw out a heal if you can. This effectively doubles the range of the heal. It's a very big change, even though it's like one small number. His boosting shield can now be used on dodge rolls. We've started to see this mechanic show up with the last big wave of X-Men. Nightcrawler has the like push my defenses higher and can use it on dodge rolls. Same thing with Kitty Pryde. I think that makes a lot of sense here. It's also going to help out Convocation quite a bit. Convocation's weakness is low physical defense, and as a result, makes them very susceptible to throws. Throws are a huge core pillar of the game. Convocation doesn't really throw things, and they're very weak to throws. Giving them 2 extra defense dice versus throws, making them all kind of like, if you can spend the power, def 4 versus throws, can seriously impact the amount of output that they take, or amount of damage coming into them over the course of a game. We'll see if the buffs to Bolts of Bedevilment are enough to keep him in the power and flush enough to keep using this. But I think so. I think it's overall a good thing. It also removes one of his core weaknesses, which is, again, you attack him with physical attacks, or more importantly, you throw things at him and he's just got to like eat his def 3. Or eat it with his def 3. Now he can be def 5. It's very good. To compound that, Eye of Agamotto, his mulligan reroll, where you can pick up everything, including skulls, and try again, works on dodging now. So again, alleviating that weakness to throws that he personally has and Convocation has. I think you're going to see a lot of Strange in Convocation as well as in Defenders, because he has a new reworked leadership. So the old leadership was pay a power, change the type of your attack. If that attack does damage, apply Hex. The new one is once per turn after damage is dealt, or if the character just happens to be 5 or more, you give them Hex. You don't have to call your shot anymore. You don't have to use it before you roll your dice. You already know whether it's going to trigger or not at the time that you decide to use it. So huge buff there. It no longer costs power. If the target is a big threat, like a big character, you don't have to deal damage for the Hex to stick. Overall, I think this is a good leadership. Hex is a very powerful, very underrated condition. It is both offensive and defensive. Putting it on big characters is strong. Unfortunately, there are like 2 popular big characters that are immune to this, which are Malekith and Immortal Hulk. Malekith, like, fairly, not super popular, but it's like semi-popular, but Immortal Hulk, very popular. So this leadership doesn't work against Immortal Hulk, and probably you don't use it against Midnight Suns because Immortal Hulk immune, Blade shakes it off very, very easily for 1 power. So you probably still, if you're a Defenders player, you probably still play the Daredevil leadership into that. Although, on the other hand, Daredevil's weak to mystic attacks, and they have a bunch of mystic attacks. So the characters, I don't know. But overall, I think it's interesting. I like that it's a little bit stronger against like the kaijus and like the big guys, and lots of Hulk running around. Hexing Hulk will mean that you're dealing more damage to him and that he outputs less damage. So very helpful in that sense. Yeah, so those are the changes. To summarize, I'm not a big fan of this character in general, like with his core design of activating models and healing his team a bunch. And so I'm somewhat sad that he got buffed. I liked him being not played. But like Doctor Strange as a fictional character, I think it's very interesting. He deserves to have a presence in the game. So on that end, I'm happy he's buffed. Also, we haven't really talked about it, but like Crimson Bands isn't that likely to actually go off and activate a thing. Because like, other than just the mulligan reroll, the faction doesn't stack a lot of rerolls. But now, with the changes to Clea and with what Mordo already does, it's possible to add 4 extra dice to the attack, making the likelihood of triggering the leaders or triggering the Mystic Binding way higher. And so I'm just nervous about it. Now, it's a lot of investment. You're talking about 4 power off Strange, 2 power off Mordo, 2 power off, or 3 power off Clea. So you're talking about a huge power investment across multiple models on your team and like ranges that all have to be set up. But you're also talking about like one of the biggest impact effects in the game. So, Yeah, I'm just nervous about it, but overall, probably good changes, and he's going to see a play. Probably, definitely in the running for character that will see the most play following this change. While we're here talking about Doctor Strange 2 also got his Eye of Agamotto change to allow him to reroll dodging, also like alleviating his weakness of being weak to throws, and especially because the game has gotten very throw heavy. I mean, it's part of the reason that like Brace is in almost every single list that's played everywhere, because just like throwing terrain is very strong and very popular, and it's like one of the cool core tenets of the game. So making him more resilient to it, I think, is a move in the right direction. Let's talk about Clea. All right, Clea, probably second most changed character in the game. She got +1 health on the front. The slow and the stagger are both easier to trigger on the spender. The slow used to be on wild, it's on hit now. And the stagger used to have these 3 symbols and a shield. The shield is gone, so it's significantly easier to trigger. And like you may actually see it now. Her power generation used to be exactly like Red Skull 1's, where she rolled 5 dice and took a damage for every skull she rolled. Now she rolls 5 dice, and if she rolls any number of skulls, she takes 2 damage. There's, I think, a debate to be had here whether this power is a buff or a nerf. The argument for a nerf is that on average she will take more damage across X number of games, because it's only less damage when you roll 3 or more skulls. If you roll 2 skulls, it's the same. If you roll 1 skull, it's more. But also, it being damage capped means that you can't be blown out as much. Like, so first of all, you're never going to roll the like, all right, turn 1, I roll 5 dice, I die. Because she both has 6 health now and only can take 2 damage. She also, in the situations where she's at 3 health and would like 3 more power and to use this action, you know that you're safe to use it, that you can't die by using it. I think it's kind of a wash. I mean, I wish it was just 1 damage, but hey, here we are. It is spend an action for 3 power, which is inherently very strong, especially on turn 1, especially with some of her turn 1 plays available. All right, she also had her teleport go up from range 3 to range 4, so now it's the same as Red Skull 1's. It makes it more flexible, makes it less telegraphed, also makes it more viable to use on not just turn 1, because of the extra 2 inches in either direction of her. And then lastly, she got a new superpower that's kind of like Death's Decree, Talons of Ferala. I'm just going to read it. When this character or another allied character within 4 of this character makes an attack, during the create attack dice pool step, this character may use the superpower. The attacker adds 2 dice to its attack roll. If the attack deals damage and the defender has a threat value of 5 or more, after the attack is resolved, the defender gains the judgment condition. So if you deal damage to a big person, they get judgment, and it also gives you 2 extra dice. It's a once per turn superpower. An important part here is that she can use it. So you can make 6 die gainers, or if you really want to like hit those conditions on Icy Tendrils, you can do 8 die spenders for 6 power, which 8 die spenders coming out of 3 threats is pretty high. I think it will be most useful when you're buffing other characters with it. She also now has power problems, or not power problems, but like power difficulties, I should say. She can never possibly have enough power, because she can spend 6 on her turn, and she can spend 3 on every other model's turn. So like, it's not absurd for you to be like, I could spend 20 power on Clea if I wanted to. And then outside of her action that makes power, she only has a gainer. So she's not going to spike into being full, and then all of a sudden that's going to turn into a bunch of Talons of Ferala, making you spike even more and getting even more power and dealing even more damage. So it doesn't have that like runaway effect that like Thanos can have sometimes when, Thanos spikes a punch, kills a character. Now he's got 1,000,000 power. Now everyone's being Death's Decreed. She doesn't really have that, but this is still very strong. And I like this as a theme in Convocation now, because Mordo has a thing very similar to this. It's cheaper, doesn't apply a condition to big guys, but you can kind of have extra dice on demand if you want it. It also punishing big people is really cool. Judgment is a crazy strong effect that is not in the game very much. Judgment, if you haven't bumped into it or you're kind of a newer player, it's when you suffer damage from an attack, you do not gain power. Like you still get power from throws, but Convocation doesn't really do throws. And you still get damage from like triggers or like explosive or anything like that. But I think this is cool. I like them putting more effects that punish big characters into the game. And I'm excited for Clea to be good. And I'm excited for Convocation, like the new wind of Convocation stuff that's coming here. This is a faction that like desperately needed help. And I like that they're getting it. I think the models are very, very cool. Like if you look at, I don't know, if you're super into all things Marvel Crisis Protocol, you've probably seen the Worthy entries, but like if you want a painting project, Convocation's great. And if you want inspiration for that painting project, Eric West's gold coin Convocation at the Worthy is incredible looking. You should go check that out. But yeah, that's Clea. Overall, pretty exciting. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about X-23 and Angela as well, and kind of Carnage. Okay, so X-23 lost exoskeleton, or adamantium skeleton. This was a really frustrating superpower for me because there are 3 characters with adamantium skeleton, and for some reason hers was just worded completely differently. It like didn't work on pushes or something like that, or it didn't work on one of the things that it worked on for everybody else. More things can throw her now, but I think that's fine. And I believe in fiction, she's never really had an adamantium skeleton. It was just kind of like a misunderstanding because I think just the claws are metal. I don't really know. I don't read a lot of the comics with X-23 in them. But then also on top of that, X-23 and Angela got their Frenzy / Angelic Assassin timing changed. So one of the most frustrating abilities, and often like a really tough discussion to have with players that were newer playing these characters, was how the timing of Frenzy and Angelic Assassin worked. It used to be that you killed a model, you have to pay the power cost right now, and then after the attack you resolve the effect. So it meant you had to have the power banked. You couldn't be on 0 power, do 2 damage with Adamantium Slash, get 2 power, spend that 2 power to pay for Frenzy. You had to already have the 2 power banked. It was unintuitive. Most effects don't work like this. And so I think this will free up X-23 to spend her power more, let's say, frivolously, or just like, it just makes the character work how you think it would. And it is a buff to both of them. I think X-23 is like a straight side grade because of losing Adamantium Skeleton, which is a nerf. But then getting Frenzy, I think, is a buff. So I think X-23 is a straight side grade. For Angela, I think it's a straight buff because she didn't lose anything. She just has a better timing for Angelic Assassin. I think this makes the character better and makes it more arguable to play her as your safe grab in Guardians or in Asgard instead of trying to splash Namor or like a better safe grab character and play the one that's in your faction. But I don't think it really makes her like suddenly splashable anywhere she wasn't before. All right, let's talk about Carnage. All right, everybody's favorite problematic character. All right. Carnage, really maligned character. Lots of people like him. His sculpt is really cool looking. He is seen essentially no play in any faction. He saw a little bit of play when like Doomed Prophecy was broken, where you could add your physical dice to your attacks for a round, and he got to add 5 dice to all of his attacks and be like, do 10 die builders, and hopefully that killed everybody. But they thankfully removed that from the game, and then he's been in obscurity ever since. So big changes here. +1 health on his front side. And then they've reworked Paint the Town Red. So Paint the Town Red has the fixed timing, where you don't have to have the power in the bank. You can get it from your Tendrils attack and then spend it. It still full heals you like before, but also it adds 2 dice to the attack. Another one of the like rough edges of Carnage was that, you would do your attack, you would kill them with Paint the Town Red, and then you would want to put Sadistic Glee, his dice buff, on the Paint the Town Red attack. You can't do that because it's not a reactive power, it's an active power. But now it's just built in. You just have the extra 2 dice. It's just when he kills something, it does 7 now. That makes this character like very spiky. I kind of, like we talked about before in Doctor Strange, I don't like this design. This like maximum blowout design. Like it's already like rough enough in Marvel Crisis Protocol when you like leave a character on 1 and you handed him a bunch of power and now he's going to mess everything up. But at least you did work towards moving towards your goal. When you leave Carnage on 1 and then he kills the model that tried to kill him and then he heals 7, like there's an enormous swing, especially because this guy is a 4 threat. And just like 15 health for 4 threat is a lot of health. Like, yes, he's 5/1/1. And if you have energy or mystic attacks, which almost every list has both of these attack types, or at least one of them in multiples, you could pick on this guy. But 8 health is a lot. Like, even like 2 5-die attacks probably don't even roll 8 successes. So assuming Carnage doesn't block anything because you're attacking his 1 defense, you might not even roll enough to like qualify. And then Carnage can threaten to kill you back. The other important thing here is that trying to hit Paint the Town Red has actually gotten easier since the last time that Carnage like ever made a splash in the meta, because there's the Wakanda Forever style card in foes now. So potentially Carnage can make 5 attacks in a turn, which is kind of wild, and a dragon I plan on chasing a little bit. Because you can make his 2 attacks, you can play Carnage rules to pull them in and make another attack, you can kill, get the Paint the Town Red attack, and then you can die Webhead or die Spider-Man or whatever. Surprise Webhead. It's called Surprise Webhead. You can do that for your 5th attack. So Carnage can potentially put out a lot of damage and can like have his power go all over the place and his health go all over the place, and you can like live the dream of like survive on 1, activate, kill a guy, be full health, survive on 1, kill a guy, regenerate to full health, and just go absolutely crazy. And it's like in one of our other videos we talked about the like kill streak kind of system that Call of Duty used as a design thing when we were talking about like Gladiator. And this is kind of the same thing where you can kind of like ride this high and this health yo-yo and see if people can fall into the Carnage trap. I think it's really cool. I think it's also pretty interesting in a couple different shells, and I'll let you know how I go with Carnage. But I think he's pretty easy in a couple shells because you can also do something kind of similar in CS, because CS has like better ways to protect him and similar amounts of like turning him on. And then you can also play Cruelty if you want to go for the 5th attack, because Cruelty doesn't need you to be CS affiliated. So Carnage, interesting. Again, I'm really terrified if this guy becomes meta because of how unfun his mechanics can be on the other side of the table. But I'm optimistic, and his sculpt is gorgeous, and like all the spider foes getting a shot in the arm would be cool. I like that faction a lot. But yeah, moving on. We have got Heimdall. Where'd Heimdall go? All right, Heimdall has 1 change. His reroll bubble went from 3 to 4 on All Seeing Eyes. I don't think this is going to change how much Heimdall is played. I think Heimdall is like just okay in Asgard character. Like all the other 3s, you play more. It's cool that you can use the All-Seeing Eye to like get rerolls on the objectives, and pay to flips are more popular now, so like maybe something will be discovered there. The most fun way to play Heimdall is still playing him in Steve 1, where Forfen costs 1, and you're constantly like pushing and slamming things next to Heimdall to get free extra attacks and doing like all the throws and all that stuff. And then All Seeing Eye being a bigger thing and only costing 1 power for 2 rerolls in Steve. If you're going to play a reroll bot in Steve, like you could do worse than Heimdall. I think it's cool. I'm skeptical that it's going to change how much he sees play. I'd love to be wrong, though. Give it up for Rainbow Swordmane. All right, we got Bishop. Hey, they fixed the one thing that was wrong with Bishop, kind of. They didn't remove Overload, but they moved it to the cleanup phase. Huzzah! So you no longer have the, like, oh no, you dazed me. And by dazing me, you gave me a bunch of power. So when I activate, so we start the next turn, I flip over and immediately take a damage from the power that I had nothing I could do about. And then more importantly, you never have the, oh, I just barely didn't kill Bishop and I left him on one, and then he has already activated, so there's no way you can dump his power. And then we get into the power phase, and he dazes in the power phase and has to sit the entire game out, or has to sit the entire turn out, which can be game losing for a 4 threat. And then Nate's favorite thing is that we can stop talking about whether or not Overload is a problem when you're playing Bishop. Bishop is actually seeing play despite all the complaints about him because he has a size 4 throw. He has Bill's throw and is like durable enough. Like he's not as tanky as Bill, but he's a discount Bill. And if he's affiliated, you can play Bishop, or I know Hellfire did this because, you know, like in old Hellfire, everything was affiliated but I think there's an argument in X-Force to play like double Bill by playing Bishop and Bill and just like throwing the opponent's Hulk medium twice every turn while you like run around and do objectives. So Bishop is not quite meta, but like the second Bill like eats a nerf or people like or Bishop gets another faction, you'll see a ton of him because he's discount Bill, and so if he's affiliated, you maybe play him over splashing a Bill, or maybe you play him and Bill. It's interesting. Next up, we have Colossus. Hey, we're taking a third attempt at designing Colossus. Woohoo! You know, like I say that as a joke, and like I know a lot of the discussion about Colossus has been we're gonna try Colossus again instead of one of the million other things. I don't think that should be your takeaway. I think your takeaway should be they finally designed Colossus and he finally feels like Colossus. All right, so his changes are his builder doesn't make you lose power anymore, and instead it pushes size 4. Exactly. Perfect. Very Colossus. Spender doesn't stagger, instead it throws size 4 on wild. In the comics and in the movies, all you ever see Colossus do is have metal skin and throw people around and push people around. He finally does that. He finally feels like that character. And then in the leaderships that can give Colossus rerolls, I think Colossus is kind of a mess now. Like those wild triggers are so impactful. It's especially impactful with all the Hulk that's running around, and he can deal with size 4 characters, and he only costs 4 threat, so he's in that area that everyone is playing Bill for, which is to like handle the opponent's Hulk. He can kind of do that. So if Colossus is in faction, you can handle that. You can play like X-Men or X-Force and play like Colossus, Bishop, Bill, and be like good luck having your Hulk do anything or be anywhere. I think he's really scary in Apocalypse, and I actually think out of this pack, other than Convocation, I think it's a toss-up between Convocation and Apocalypse as to who came out better. But big Colossus buff, and I think Colossus is best in Apocalypse, where he has access to the Horseman rerolls and gets to like play. I think he's Pestilence and gets to play like the Pestilence game. Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. Colossus, big deal. Strong. Oh, also Big Brother got changed. Big Brother is like a big wordy paragraph, but it essentially means now, so he has taunt like he did before, and it can be used that way. But if the model that's attacking one of your models is within 4 of Colossus, Colossus can pay 2 to Big Brother, which lets him like aggressive towards them to try to like set up a taunt. So it can be one of those things where like, okay, Hulk goes, he throws Colossus out of being taunting him. He like punches the thing he wants, and then Colossus can like walk back in and try to get the taunt going again. Maybe Hulk was a bad example because Hulk throws medium and Colossus only advances short. But I think you get the idea. Is like he can miss it the first time and then have the like taunt up the second time. So I think this is a huge buff for Colossus, and more importantly, he finally mechanically matches what people think he should do from his fiction. All right, next up we have Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler ate a very small nerf. I've been playing a bunch of X-Men lately for a video that's going to come out after this one, and Nightcrawler felt way too strong. I think this small change helps that a lot. So he no longer auto stuns you if he makes the attack outside of 3 or outside of 2. He now has to deal damage to stun you, which seems kind of small, but like going from always to needs to successfully attack is a big deal. But also, like, stun is way more brutal when it doesn't come with damage. Because a lot of like the stunning things in the game are like, here's a big attack, also takes stun, no more power from here on out. But I also just gave you a pile of power. So now that Nightcrawler has to hand them at least 1 power to place the stun on them, it does actually impact the strength of this. Because like Teleporting Strike was most brutal when it whiffed and it stunned you. And then Nightcrawler like puffed over there, then attacked somebody else and stunned somebody else, and then like puffed away. Or would for his Brimstone Blitz on a different model. I definitely think this is warranted. I think this model, if Shang-Chi was balanced, a lot of people would be complaining about Nightcrawler, but we'll talk about that in the X-Men video. Oh, the other interesting part of this is that in AMG's patch notes, which I don't have up, is that one of the other interesting things about that is that in AMG's patch notes, they list Nightcrawler as updated timing for Teleporting Strike and Brimstone Blitz, which makes me believe that this is how they intended the character to work originally, because it used to say after damage instead of after attack, which there was always like the question of players playing new here is like, does the after damage timing step, which only exists on Nightcrawler, happen if no damage happens? And the forum had always ruled, yes, it does, that step still happens. And we essentially played it like it was after the attack was resolved kind of timing step. I like it that it matches the rest of the game. I think this was like a templating experiment they made and then realized there were a lot of problems with it, and they would have to like update tons of stuff going forward. And I think reverting it back to how the game's always been is a good call. All right, next we got Gambit. We've seen Gambit already. He was a limited edition card at Adepticon, and he was limited edition in the new form. So we'll run down his changes quickly, but you can watch the video over here of me and Nate talking about all the Adepticon reveals where we go into more depth about Gambit. But his changes are Kinetic Ace went down to strength and is energy typed. His spender has stun on double wild and costs 3 instead of 4. And then he has Parting Shot. His enhanced agility isn't a clone of Parting Shot anymore. It can now go any direction instead of away. And then he now counts wilds as 2 successes on attack and defense. That's really what this is about. Oh, and he lost the boost his dice numbers. So this makes him much more power efficient. It makes a little something extra, like essentially you can almost always buy another success for 1 power, which if you're doing Kinetic Ace will refund itself. It also, like, his wild effects are super strong. It makes the double wild stun actually fairly likely, because it's more like hit wild instead of wild. And then the character goes absolutely bananas when you can stack rerolls on him. Like, this character hitting a crit or 2 in his initial roll, and then just having his dice available for rerolls and mods, makes him very dangerous and very deadly. The bow staff is like 90-something% to push a model of size 3 off of a point, which is a wild place for a 3 threat to be. That's even more likely than the mummy pushing a character off of a point, because the mummy gets it on wilds and he can turn the skulls into wilds. Gambit gets it on wilds and can turn hits into wilds. So it's significantly more likely. I think the mummy's 80%. I think it's 90% on Gambit. Oh, Gambit's 1 dice less. Maybe it's 80%, because it's not 5 dice, it's 4 dice. Anyway, right? Because it's 70%, and then 70% to get the hit, and then the wild is 40 something percent. So yeah, maybe it's 80%. Anyway, yeah, new Gambit. He's really swingy. Sometimes he's like rolls his 3 dice and has 5 blocks, and sometimes he just dies. And sometimes he one shots Captain America with a 4 die attack, and sometimes his attacks just bounce. He's just like an incredibly luck swingy character, which I think kind of fits his like gambler background. Plus, you get to do his fun voice when you play him now, and he's good. So I like the Gambit changes. I think the enhanced agility makes some of the Senator plays with Gambit a lot better. It also makes him more mobile. Attacking him can get him back onto a point. So like if he's been thrown off the point by a character and then you throw a random attack into him, he can maybe hop back onto the point instead of just like parting shot to safety. Lastly, we have Magik. All right, Magik has had a couple changes. She has 1 extra hit point on the front. She has crit wild hex on her gun. She is immune to incinerate. Okay, so the 1 hit point on the front is the biggest, most important change. Significantly impacts her durability. She is in, and then like these buffs to Magik change or impact a bunch of factions because she's in Convocation as probably their best 3. I don't really know how that works out with Clea, but she was like their best 3 before, despite like not being very good, and I think she's still in the running for being the best 3 now with the buffs and with actual competition in the role. The Hex is like not very likely to happen. So, I mean, it's nice to have and it's flavorful. It adds flavor and dynamism to the character without impacting her power. So, it's like, I think it's good, interesting design. The immunity to incinerate, does her card incinerate the target? She spends 3, choose another character within 2 of Magik, so she can't place herself with it. Okay, never mind. So, it doesn't actually impact how the card works with her. The buffs to Magik impact Convocation, X-Men, Apocalypse, and Convocation. I think really big deal. I'm a little bit worried about all the buffs that Apocalypse has gotten. Apocalypse was like the 3rd most popular thing at squad goals. He's very popular. His win rate is decent. He poses like strong questions. I think he's a good model in the game. And then, but was kind of like the only thing like making him like feel fair was that everything that he gave these new strong superpowers to were like unloved, underused models. And now 3 of them are just like probably meta strong. And then he's going to give them superpowers on top and rerolls on top. So I'm a little bit nervous about how strong that's going to make Apocalypse. But Apocalypse is extremely strong or extremely popular amongst Marvel fans and X-Men fans and all that stuff. So I guess him being strong is like not the worst thing in the world. I think Magik also sees quite a bit of play in Professor because she's one of the models that can start the power chain early because she has a 1-cost superpower. And so this makes that list better. I think especially on the Senator's mass transit play, having her be more durable when you have to like spend an activation flopping her out there is exciting. Oh, and then the other thing, sorry, I completely forgot to mention New Mutants. She's the leader of New Mutants. And so New Mutants was held back by the fact that you kind of had to play Magik, who was like fairly weak, and that faction's leadership required people to take attacks. 1 more hit point means maybe 1 more attack you can take, 1 more leadership trigger. I think pretty good, smart changes overall. And I think I think she's a better like trading piece because she does way more damage than a model of her threat typically does. But it used to come at the cost of she was a 5/5 with like very little defensive tech. She was just like mobile and good at trading. And now she's even better at trading because she's a little bit more durable. And so that makes her a little bit easier to deliver, etc., etc. So that's all of the characters, right? I'm pretty sure. Did I skip anybody? I don't think so. Okay, so overall, there's 16 models in these changes and 5 TTCs. The TTCs are essentially not changed, so there's 16 models. And 2 of the models aren't really changed, so there's 14 models. A lot of people, including myself to a certain extent, are disappointed with this balance pass. We'd all have liked it to be bigger. There are a lot of rumors swirling around that it could have been gigantic and that a lot of stuff was in playtest to be changed. And I think that's us being a victim of our own expectations. Like AMG, I think was AMG's official communications were really clear about the scope of this, but the leaks were hot and heavy and kind of everywhere. And the fortunate thing is we know we're getting another pass in a year, so if you have something and that they're going to reflect the repacks. So if you have something you care about that's being repacked next year, it's probably in the next balance pass. So like, hang on, Sentinels players, you're not totally forgotten about. While I think a lot of the community is disappointed, I think we should also recognize that like we did this to ourselves. It's very reminiscent of when X-Men were spoiled, that X-Men were coming, and people were like, "Oh, what's the X-Men starter box gonna be?" And AMG had said nothing about an X-Men starter box, but instead there was just like rampant speculation about what 10 X-Men and Brotherhood characters would be in the X-Men starter box, which ironically is actually coming out later this year. So they're finally getting that. But lots of people were really disappointed that it wasn't a starter set. Instead, it was just like individually packed characters, and you could play X-Men or Brotherhood. So it reminds me a lot of that. So remember to keep your speculation kind of under control. And let me know what you guys think about the new balance pass. Are you disappointed? What are you excited to play? Is this going to make you pick up any faction you put down? Are there any spicy splashes I forgot about in here? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget that fun is a finite resource.